Welcome back. Now, last Wednesday, leaders of 44 African countries met in the Rwandan capital of Kigali, where they approved a historic trade deal, which is expected to boost economic growth and development on the continent. The African Continental Free Trade Area is designed to create a single continental market for goods and services with free movement of businesses, persons, and investment. It is also expected to expand intra-African trade through better harmonization and coordination of trade liberalization and facilitation regimes. It's the kind of initiative most analysts had long advocated for Africa to turn things around for the continent. But guess what? Two of the continent's biggest economies, Nigeria and South Africa, alongside 8 other African countries, pulled out of the deal. The Nigerian government had been the main driver of the initiative, but it pulled out after complaints from the country's biggest trade union, the Nigeria Labour Congress, and domestic manufacturers in the country under the aegis of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. Now, at a Federal Executive Council meeting last Wednesday, the government shed more light on its decision to withdraw.
The explanation from the president, which the FEC bought, was that he would not want to agree to anything that would hinder local entrepreneurs. And on the surface, except he's proven wrong, that agreement had the potential, had the capacity to affect local entrepreneurship. Then he also said anything also that could encourage the dumping of finished goods in Nigeria was going to be contrary to our interests. So it's one of the reasons why he declined. Then he said the country was yet to fully understand the economic and security implications of the agreement.
We debated it. We felt as a team that as far as we were concerned, it was good to go. And I think Mr. Adesina has explained that other stakeholders came and said, we've not been carried along. And the president then said, let's go and assess what they're saying. And I don't really think, these are major decisions that affect the economy and affect the lives of Nigerians. And if stakeholders, and I think the president specifically mentioned MAN, that had come forward and said, look, we haven't been carried along, we're not clear about this. And the president has said, create a forum and a committee and go and engage and understand what their challenges are and understand so that we can make a clear decision. These are national issues and they must be taken to, and I don't think there's anything wrong with an iterative process that goes, you must get the answer right. It doesn't matter how long it takes you to get to the answer, you must get it right. And you must be sure when you're signing, and that's I think what Mr. President said, that I am signing on behalf of the nation, I'm signing on behalf of the people. So I want to be sure that stakeholders have been carried along appropriately, and I think that's entirely the right response. If a number of stakeholders say we didn't know about this, we haven't understood this fully, it's absolutely appropriate for everybody to say, hold on, let's go back and let's make sure everybody is clear.
Now, the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria are opposing the deal for a number of reasons. They believe some terms of the deal pose a danger to the development of the Nigerian economy and could, in fact, kill local manufacturing. The body's president, Frank Udemba Jacobs, at a media briefing in Lagos last week, commended the Nigerian government for pulling out of the deal for now. He also took the opportunity to highlight the concerns of the domestic manufacturers.
They want to liberalize, right away they want to liberalize 90% of the products so that they'll have zero duty on them. When they did consult with us, if they have consulted with us, we will tell them that 10% remaining is too small. Because even according to the ECOWAS CET, we're enjoying more than 10%. So for us to now allow to decrease that number to 10% only would be inimical to the growth of the manufacturing sector. And that is why we said we need that information. They weren't able to give us, the chief negotiator was requested, we requested for that information. He didn't seem to have it. And that was why we insisted that we should move forward until we get that information. What are the specific product lines? We don't know which product lines that are involved. So we needed that information. This is part of the engagement we are going to have with the chief negotiator and the government to determine what these product lines are, to ensure that These product lines are the ones that we really want to protect. You all Nigerians, we don't have steady power, and we're going to compete with other operators that have steady power 24/7. We don't have a good road network. We don't have functional railway to transport our raw materials and finished goods across the country. So we're disadvantaged in terms of operating environment, which makes our products uncompetitive. And until these infrastructure deficiencies are addressed, we will never be competitive.
All right, joining me on the program now to discuss this further is the Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Muda Yusuf. Mr. Yusuf, thank you very much for joining us on the program. Let me get your take first on the decision by the Nigerian government not to sign the CFTA agreement at this time, of course, saying it needs time to carry out further consultation and to further study the document.
Well, I agree with the position of the federal government that an agreement of this nature is of such strategic importance that requires adequate consultation. The only worry is that, about a month ago or thereabout, at the AU meeting in Addis Ababa, the president was one of those in the forefront of calling for and supporting and canvassing in favor of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. He made a very strong submission in support of the African Continental Free Trade Area. So if few weeks down the line, we suddenly did not show up for the signing of the agreement, that for me is a bit disturbing and could also be embarrassing.
But is anything wrong if, for instance, you find that, you're quite right, Nigeria had been in the forefront of, the struggle now to get this deal done. But if along the line your people are complaining and you now discover, look, these people seem to have a genuine case, is anything wrong with, putting a stop, or just you press the pause button now and you take a second look at the situation?
No, there's nothing wrong in it. I mean, if you decide to change your mind, or we feel that it will not be in our interest to go ahead, there's nothing wrong in stopping. The point I'm making is that before we start the engagement in the first place, that should have been sufficient and very robust consultation. We didn't just think about this thing yesterday. If you got to a point where our president had to go to an AU meeting and openly canvassed and presented a very strong statement in support of the Continental Free Trade Area, and a few weeks after we made a U-turn. I'm not saying that it is wrong to make a U-turn if you think it is right. The point I'm making is that it could have been more dignifying not to have supported it in the first instance, not to have gone to the AU to make a very strong statement of support, virtually championing even the call for the African Continental Free Trade Area. I find it very, very disturbing. So the point I'm making here is that we need to do our homework properly in the first instance before we go to such an arena. It's an international arena to make a position, to canvass any position. That is the point I'm making. But it is still better to hold on, review the thing, than sign an agreement that will not be in the enduring or lasting interest of the Nigerian economy and its people.
Of course, the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, and they are your members anyway, they've actually come out very strongly against the deal, and they have some very serious concerns. What do you make of those?
Well, their concerns are very genuine because the Nigerian manufacturing sector is very weak in the area of competitiveness. They are weak first because of their cost of operation, the cost of energy, cost of logistics, cost of fund. And all these things put together make them to be very, very uncompetitive. When you relate their prices and their cost to what happens elsewhere in Africa and possibly elsewhere in the world. So there is a strong case to be made that, okay, if you have an industrial sector that is not competitive internationally, it will not make much sense to expose such a sector to international competition. If you do that, that may be the undoing of the Nigerian industrial sector. So that is the main issue. But let me say this. The condition of our Nigerian industrial sector has continued to pose a major dilemma for our trade policy. We have the same challenge even within the ECOWAS sub-region. We have the same challenge within the context of even globalization itself. And all these things are coming into play because we had an industrialization strategy that is defective. It's defective in the sense that the focus of our industrialization strategy is what you call import substitution strategy. It's a strategy that is focused more on your domestic market than on the external market. And the trend these days is to build competitiveness of firms, of industries across sectors, to be internationally competitive, to be export-oriented. That is what the strategy should be. So the emphasis going forward should be to build the competitiveness of our local firms, to build the competitiveness of our manufacturing firms. Because this current model is not sustainable. If you build a wall around yourself and you have so much porous borders and all of that, many of these products will still come in. So going forward, I think the emphasis of our industrialization should be on building competitiveness. If we need to give the manufacturing sector some subsidy, some incentives, some tax relief, tax holidays, let us do so that the economy can be a bit more open. Because the economy is not just about manufacturing. Manufacturing accounts for about 7% or 9% of GDP. We have the services sector that are also seeking to open up. They're also seeking to explore opportunities outside of this country. We also have the construction sector. We have a whole lot of sectors that want to seek opportunities outside of this country. So if you continue to maintain this very strict closure of the economy, some aspects of the economy will also suffer. We have the exporters that also want to take advantage of opportunities in other parts of the world. So we need to focus more on building a competitive industrial sector, because protectionism is not a sustainable strategy. But for now, I think we don't have much choice.
You're quite right, because the Manufacturers Association made it clear that they are not against the African Continental Free Trade Area. They are not against it at all. As a matter of fact, it's something they want. It's just that they want certain concerns to be addressed. And of course, they did talk about the issue of infrastructure that you've highlighted there, that is making our manufacturing here not to be competitive. Local industry is not competitive. And they need to improve on infrastructure in the country. But something they talked about, because, I mean, they know that infrastructure is a challenge and that it just would take some time to fix that. But they did talk about the issue of tariff lines, for instance, that the document, for instance, provides for free tariffs. So about 90% of the products that where they're only left with just 10% of products that you have tariffs imposed on. So, and that what they're getting from the current ECOWAS deal, that's the common economic tariffs of ECOWAS now, that they're getting a better deal on that. So for them, that is a problem. They also talked about the issue of the enforcement of the issue of enforcement now, that like they gave an example, the case of Morocco signing an agreement with the EU, and that the EU could just use that as Morocco now as a backdoor to now dump their goods, especially in the Nigerian market that is a huge one.
Yes, I think that's a strong point to be made in that. But let me also say that when we talk about the EU, the products of the EU are not likely to be much of a problem to the Nigerian economy as products from Asia, because the cost of production in the EU is also very high. So for the EU, I don't see that being much of any very serious threat. If you talk to an average manufacturer today in Nigeria, the biggest challenge they face in terms of importation of products, in terms of competition, in terms of smuggling, are products that are coming from Asia. So that is even a bigger issue than the EU. And when we talk about tariff lines and all of that, you know, when you are talking about a free trade agreement, you are talking about a free trade area. What a free trade area presupposes is that you are going to collapse all the barriers. You are going to collapse, remove tariff barriers, remove non-tariff barriers, and so on and so forth. In ECOWAS, because of this same challenge of competitiveness, we have introduced what we call import adjustment tax, which is an additional tax on top of the normal common external tariff regime that we have. Perhaps the same model could be replicated within the context of the African free trade area. But the point that was made about Morocco is perhaps also genuine, because some other countries within the continent already have signed some trade agreements with countries outside of the continent. But there's what you call the rule of origin. The rule of origin says that whatever products will be traded within the context of this agreement has to be products that are produced in those countries.
No, you're absolutely right. And it's this rule of origin that the man is saying they want assurances of how this issue of the rule of origin would be enforced with the continental free trade area.
Yeah, there is need for assurance, but unfortunately, in many of these African economies, institutions are very weak. So you cannot guarantee that there will be effective enforcement of that. So to that extent, the concern about goods coming from EU through Morocco or through some other countries within the continent, those concerns are real, because we have very weak institutions, and many of these trade policies or things are hardly properly enforced. Even within the West African sub-region, the level of enforcement is weak. The institutions are also very weak. That is why some of these policy agreements and policy regimes have not been as effective as they should be. That is why we have so much of smuggling, dumping of products from all over the country. Even products that are under import prohibition are finding their way freely into Nigeria and into some other countries. So institutional capacity is a major factor that we need to worry about.
But generally speaking, I mean, what would be your own take generally, you know, apart from those concerns now raised by the Manufacturers Association and of course Nigeria as a whole? What would be your own take on this this continental?
Well, my take is that for the future, we may not be ready for it immediately. But as part of our strategy for growing this economy, we cannot continue to maintain a very tight, closed regime of trade. There are benefits in trade, and there are also some demerits in trade. But to get the best from trade, you also have to build your capacity. So my take is that we have to concentrate more on building the capacity of this economy to be competitive. We cannot rely for too long on this protectionist approach to industrialization. At the end, what can sustain the Nigerian industrial sector is competitiveness and the ability to compete. We have tried this model. I mean, take for instance the textile sector. For several decades, we have imposed import prohibition on textiles, on importation. We have imposed high tariffs on textiles. We have done everything. As we speak today, the Nigerian textile industry is still grasping for breath. They are still struggling to survive in spite of all these protectionist strategies and tools that we have deployed to support them. So what this underscores is that we need to bring down the cost of production, the cost of operation, the cost of everything, the cost of inputs that the industrial sector utilizes or what they use. If we need to give them incentives, let us give them incentives so that this economy can be a bit more open. We have other sectors outside of manufacturing that are also looking up to the outside world to expand, to take advantage beyond the shores of Nigeria. But for as long as we have these policies, they cannot take advantage. So we need to look at these things holistically and refocus our strategy from building an industrial sector that is export-oriented rather than an industrial sector that is just inward-looking or domestically focused. I think that is the way to go to ensure that we have a sustainable industrialization and a sustainable strategy to promote industrial development.
I mean, you look across the continent, let's face it. I mean, just look across the continent. You know, they industrialize, or countries now with some industrial base across the continent, you could just count on your fingertips, probably very few of them, not even up to 10. As a matter of fact, most of these African countries produce nothing at all. So, I mean, this agreement, who do you think it will favor most?
No, you see, if you have the right environment, industries will come here. They may not even be domestic. They could be franchised. A lot of industries are in Mauritius, for instance. Quite a lot of industries are in Egypt, Morocco, and because of the environment that is created. You need, if you have the right kind of environment, capital will come into this country. They will even make our country a hub for production. So what is important is to create the environment for these industries, whether it is domestic, whether they are foreign, for them to come here. So we continue to lament about the fact that, okay, the environment, I mean, our destiny is in our hands. It's not rocket science. A lot of export is taking place in Mauritius. It's a very small country. A lot is happening in Egypt, in Morocco, in some other African countries, even in Rwanda. So the focus should be on creating the right environment for foreign capital, for domestic capital, to come into the industrial space and to even come into other sectors. Many of our sectors are actually even very competitive internationally. Take our financial services sector, for instance, even our ICT. Some of them are, look at our entertainment industry, look at our film industry. They are competitive. Some of them can stand shoulder to shoulder with any of their peers in the whole world. So these things are doable. What is important is to create the environment, to create the incentives, to create the support so that Nigerian private sector can be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with any of their peers around the world.
Anyway, the government has set up a committee, and that committee is supposed to meet with the various stakeholders and try to get their buy-in and then submit its report in the next 2 weeks. After this meeting, you see Nigeria just signing up to that document?
After the meeting? No. You see, this is not something we can do in a hurry because people have invested money. They are taking a risk. And investing in the real economy, investing in the industrial sector is a high risk in this environment. You know? So we have to create the environment to make sure that when we open up, these industries will not collapse. So that is why I will support the position of the Manufacturers Association. It is desirable to open up an economy. It is desirable to take advantage of a much larger market than our own market. But again, we have to also take into account what will be the implication for those who have already invested huge capital in the Nigerian manufacturing sector. So that is the logic. Once we're able to do that to some degree, why not? We can sign up to it.
All right, Mr. Muda Yusuf, thank you very much for your input. Thanks for your time. Well, Well, that's it on the program, but you can watch it again on our website. That's at www.tv360nigeria.com. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Is youtube.com/TV360 Nigeria. Do subscribe now to get the latest updates and, of course, update now on things happening around the country. You can join us on Google Plus as well as at TV360 Nigeria, or you can simply like us on Facebook. The address is facebook.com/TV360 online. You can also follow us on Twitter. Our handle is at TV360 Nigeria. We thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again next week.